Did you know that Jesus challenged social norms in radical ways that still impact us today? His teachings weren't just revolutionary in his time. They continue to shape how we think, act, and live. In a world dominated by power, wealth, and rigid social hierarchies, Jesus' words were like a bolt of lightning. He didn't just preach about spiritual matters. He called for a complete transformation of society's values. Let's step back for a moment. During Jesus' time, status meant everything. Power was concentrated in the hands of a few, wealth determined your worth, and enemies were to be crushed, not loved. The vulnerable were often ignored. And into this world, Jesus came, preaching a message that flipped the script completely. He called people to rethink everything, to love their enemies, to serve others rather than seek status, and to care for the most vulnerable. These weren't just spiritual platitudes. They were radical challenges to the very foundations of society. Take, for example, his teaching on loving one's enemies. In a world where vengeance and retaliation were the norms, Jesus boldly proclaimed in Matthew 5:44, "But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Love your enemies? This wasn't just counterintuitive. It was revolutionary. It called people to rise above their instincts and reflect the love of God, even toward those who hurt them. And then there's the parable of the Good Samaritan. In Jesus' time, Samaritans were seen as outcasts, hated by the Jewish people. But in this story, Jesus portrays the Samaritan as the hero, the one who shows true compassion. His message was clear. Kindness and mercy have no boundaries, and love is shown through actions, not labels. This parable shattered the prejudices of the day and continues to challenge how we view others. Perhaps one of Jesus' most radical teachings was his call to humility. In a society where power and prestige were prized, Jesus flipped the narrative. He said, "The last shall be first, and the first shall be last." Matthew 20:16. He even washed his disciples' feet, an act of profound humility that no one would have expected from a leader. Jesus wasn't just telling people to be humble, he was living it. But if we're talking about radical moments, nothing compares to the Sermon on the Mount. Here, Jesus laid out some of his most challenging and transformative teachings. "Blessed are the poor in spirit," he said, "for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness." In a world that celebrated the powerful, the wealthy, and the proud, Jesus uplifted the humble and the broken. His words weren't just revolutionary, they were dangerous. They challenged the social order, invited people to embrace humility and sacrifice, and offered a new way of seeing the world. And the most remarkable part? These teachings are just as relevant today. They challenge us to rethink how we treat one another, how we live, and what we value. In today's world, where power, wealth, and status are still so often seen as the ultimate goals, Jesus' message remains a powerful counter-narrative. His radical teachings call us to love radically, serve selflessly, and live humbly. Imagine what the world would look like if we all lived by these principles. Jesus didn't just challenge the world he lived in, he challenges us today. His message of love, humility, and radical compassion is one that calls to each of us. It's not always easy to follow, but it's a path that leads to true transformation. So what do you think? Are we ready to follow the most radical teachings of Jesus in our lives today? Which of his teachings resonates most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's explore how we can live out these powerful messages together.